In MedTech, the difference between a good quarter and a great one isn't always the product. It's the friction standing in the way. Broken sales cycles, misaligned teams, deals that stall at the finish line. Every leader feels it, and the best ones know how to remove it. Welcome to Zero Friction, the podcast where we go inside the minds of MedTech's top commercial leaders to uncover the real barriers they face, the decisions they make, and the systems they build to keep the revenue moving. I'm your host, Terry Kuchaluchis. Let's remove some friction. So welcome, audience. Thank you for joining us today. I have the privilege of having Gary Wakeford with me today. Gary is the founder and CEO of Sonistic, and he has taken on a big challenge to bring a revolutionizing technology to the marketplace, and so with a company called Sonistic. So Gary, I'm going to turn it over to you to give us a little background on your career and what has led you to Sonistic, and where do you see it going?
First of all, thank you for having me. I've been very much looking forward to having this conversation. Always happy to spread the word about who we are and what we're trying to accomplish. As far as my personal background, I spent 30 years in the medical device industry. The first half of that career was with a large-scale company that initially was a private company when I went to work for them, but we had a very successful IPO, and they were eventually acquired by a much larger company. But the first half of my career was all in sales and sales management at every level. I started as an entry-level sales rep with this medical device company. Was over the course of my 15 years there, I was promoted to district manager, regional manager, divisional manager, and eventually national sales manager. And then the second half of my career, kind of out of the blue, I got tapped on the shoulder by a company that wanted to bring me on, the very early stage startup company, to manage and build the Midwest for them. So I made that leap of faith and left a very solid, really good company to get involved with the startup. Happy to announce that that startup was very successful. They were eventually acquired by Medtronic for a little over $500 million. And once you've had that experience of being involved with everything from the ground zero with a company, it just kind of becomes part of who you are. And I loved it because I got involved in everything from raising capital to helping to get through the FDA regulatory process to getting salespeople up and running, sitting through an FDA audit, when the FDA came knocking. So it really rounded out my personal background. And the second half of my career has been involved in just doing that. I've been involved, Sonistic is my fourth startup that I've been involved with, and I'm happy to report that the first three had successful exits at varying degrees, some much more successful than other, but they all continue to be viable operating companies. So, first half of the career was all sales and sales management. The second half was been in the early stage startup world.
That's exciting. So you're kind of a serial entrepreneur at this point, I see.
Very accurate description, yes.
Oh, that's great. Well, it's awesome that you've taken that early sales experience and you've managed to kind of find a way to now lead four companies to market or three companies four companies to market, three companies to exit, and hopefully another fourth exit coming up here. So tell me about Sonistic. And I think, when you and I first talked about it, it sounds like it's potentially a game changer for the front door of the hospital.
We believe that it is. Sonistic is focused on the IV or intravenous catheter market. And most people that aren't intimately involved with vascular access don't realize that the insertion of an IV catheter is the most commonly done medical procedure in the world, bar none. There are 400 million IV catheters purchased every year in the U.S. alone, and there are 2 billion purchased every year on a global basis. And we're focused on that market, but in particular, we're focused on a subset within that market where the patients are basically considered divas. And I love that acronym because when you hear the word diva, you always think of a real problem child or a real pain in the neck. Well, in this instance, it simply stands for difficult intravenous access. And these poor patients end up feeling like a human pincushion. I mean, it is not uncommon for these patients to experience 6, 8, 10 or more failed insertion attempts before an IV catheter is successfully placed. And we
Wow.
just have a very simple device, the Sonistic guide-wire introducer, that helps the clinician get it right the first time. And when I present our technology to potential investors, that's the one line I ask them to pay attention to. Sonistic helps you get it right the first time. If you remember that and only that, you know who we are and what we bring to the table.
That's really exciting. So, what are the costs of failed intravenous access to a hospital?
Well, it varies. If you look at just placing an IV catheter, it's minimal. I mean, I think a standard IV catheter probably costs around $3. But the real cost and the real waste involved is when you have these multiple failed insertions with the patient. As a general rule of thumb, the standard of care, a lot of the IV catheters are placed by nurses. Depending on where in your hospital, it could be a physician if you're in emergency medicine. The notion is that as a standard of care, normally a clinician is allowed to try 2 attempts to place an IV catheter. And if they fail twice, they're done. They have to walk away and go get another clinician, and that person then just steps in and tries twice. If they fail twice, they're done. So, in a situation where there's been 8 failed attempts to get a catheter in place in one of these DIVA patients, you're talking the time and effort of 4 different clinical people, not only the loss and the cost in materials in terms of the catheters and the preps and the wipes and everything used to prepare the patient for this, but the time of those 4 different clinicians and the time it takes in terms of from start to finish of getting the catheter in place so you can start the administration of meds or whatever it is the reason you're placing the catheter in the first place. And that's where Sonistic comes in. If you can get that catheter placed, first time, every time, you're saving a tremendous amount of time and effort and waste, and you're making it a much more pleasant experience for the patient. Imagine you're the patient, and this is your first experience in the hospital of them trying to place a catheter. And every time they fail, it's painful. It increases your fear and your angst. It's a horrible way to start your hospital experience. And patients tend to very quickly lose all faith in their caregivers when that happens.
That's not a good I think you bring up a great point where that's the first level of trust, and it's probably the first interaction of something serious when they do get to the hospital. And that's the first thing that, if it were to fail, probably drops that level of confidence and trust down considerably.
Sit down considerably, but patients tend to remember that. And as a result, they give very poor patient satisfaction scores before they leave the hospital, which is not a good thing for the hospital.
No, we all know that they're rated and graded on that, as we speak. So great novel technology. What was the premise, or was there an event? Like, what happened for somebody to come and say, I'm going to go develop a Sonistic?
Real founder is Dr. Hawa Amansori, and she developed this technology at George Washington University when she was there going through her medical school. And there are other guide wire introducers on the market, and she was using one of these consistently. But the frustration she had was all of the other devices on the market require a second hand to advance that wire. And it just caused additional difficulty. It made it more kind of a clumsy and awkward procedure. And she literally just felt there's got to be a better way to do this, a simpler way. So that led her to develop the Sonistic guide wire introducer, which has a patent protected track wheel, which allows them to advance the guide wire with the same hand they're using to insert the IV catheter. It makes it a much more seamless, smooth, and easy procedure to help you get it right the first time.
That's great. And so it sounds like, it was born out of need, which is a great thing, born out of need from a clinician. And it has the potential to really kind of change the way things are. So founder made by a doctor. Where do you go from here? And so, I'd just say number one is, sounds like this device has the opportunity to remove some friction opportunities from the hospital system itself. So smoother, easier entry point into the hospital, better IV access, pleasing patients, creating better experiences, which is good for the patient, but it's also good for the hospital in the long run when it comes to getting those appropriate scores that they need for their reimbursement schedules and everything like that. So I'm sure this all plays into the value.
All of that's true. And the thing that I really like about it, two components of it. One, it's not high tech. It's a very simple device that solves a very real solution, an acknowledged problem at the hospital level. And it also just enhances a procedure that they're already doing. So we're not really changing anything. We're not really asking them to do something different. We're giving them an easier way of doing what they're already doing. And it gives them much, much better success rates. Again, get it right the first time is our whole logo. And I think that that is really important when you're trying to introduce a new medical technology to the marketplace. And I think, to take the next step with this product, rather than for it to be just a niche product, I think there's a very important educational piece that we'll have to address. And that is this. Right now, the normal procedure is if a patient's in the hospital and they have to place an IV catheter, they get all their materials that they need in the IV catheter and they try to take that next step. Now, I think there are a few basic, simple questions that they can ask the patient first and foremost, and that's easily to identify if the patient is in fact a DIVA patient. And if we can teach them to identify that they're a DIVA patient first and foremost, then they can reach for the Sonistic device first, rather than put the patient through that 4 or 6 or 8 failed attempts. And I think our long-term goal is any facility that routinely places IV catheters should have the Sonistic device on the shelf for their DIVA patients.
Got it. And is it an easy identification process on who might need one versus who doesn't need one?
Very few questions you can ask. And the number one question, which is so obvious and so easy, is simply ask the patient, have you ever had difficulties or bad experience with having an IV catheter placed? And if the answer to that question is yes, then they are almost certainly a DIVA patient. A couple of other things, if you can see the vessel, the vein, but you can't palpate it, you can't feel the pulse, probably not a good vessel to try. Don't go after that. The flip side of that, which is a little bit odd, even if you can't see the vessel, but you can palpate it, you can feel it, it probably is a good vein to go after. So it's just a matter of giving them a little reference card, ingraining that into them, that they ask these 2 or 3 questions up front. And if the answer is yes, this patient's probably a DIVA, reach for the Sonistic, make your life a whole lot easier and make it a more pleasant procedure for the patient.
And I'm guessing, I'm just thinking about the patients that probably have the most probable cause for not getting it on the first stick would probably be the elderly, right? And maybe even small children as well, right? Those 2 areas
historically fall into this category. The elderly tend to be harder vascular access sticks than other people, but there's a whole host of people that fall into this category. Diabetics tend to have terrible vasculature. People with renal or kidney diseases tend to have difficult vascular access. The obese people are harder people to stick. So there's a whole list of people that fall into this category. And with the current demographics of our company, of our country, with every year that goes by, the number of people that fall into this category continues to increase. We always say 15% of the patient population currently fall into this category. 100% of the time when I use that number with a clinician and they say, no, Gary, it's more than that. It's easily 20 or 25%. But
Wow.
even at 15% of 400 million, that's the potential of 60 million procedures where we can help the hospital right out of the gate.
That's a lot. That's quite a bit.
Well, yes.
So what's next for Sonistic? Where do you stand today? And what's your pathway in getting this thing in the hands of clinicians where they can, really see some impact and value with?
Very happy to report that we have achieved our 510K FDA clearance to market. So that is a huge milestone that we have overcome. And that's also a significant de-risking factor for potential investors. So our immediate short-term mission critical items are pretty simple. One is we're currently in the process of raising a Series A capital raise. We have a target of $1.5 million for that raise. So number one is to raise capital. Number two is we will use that capital to get production quality product on the shelf so that we can then get that quality in the hands of clinicians. We have our FDA clearance, but it's very important to initially get some very good real world feedback from the clinicians to be absolutely sure the product is truly market ready. It's not uncommon that when you get to that step that there may be some minor changes or minor tweaks in the product so that it's just exactly the way the clinicians want it. So we need to overcome that step first. And once we get that thumbs up, that solid green light for clinicians, then we know we'll be truly market ready to do an initial, probably controlled release to the marketplace.
You've got the basic development done with the thumb wheel and the whole thing for the delivery system, right? It's pretty much a done deal and tweak it up a little bit.
We feel the product is ready to go, but trying to be cautiously optimistic, you always want to hear that from the clinicians before you take that last step.
Right. So what's been your biggest challenge up to date right now, other than the money piece that you're in the fundraising spot? But up until now, what was sort of the more fun challenges that you had getting it to this stage?
Hey, probably identifying the right contract manufacturer to work with. And we're in the process of taking that next step. We have thoroughly vetted what we feel is an ideal partner for us. That's Valentian Medical, and they're based out of Houston, Texas. But, when you're a small startup company, you don't have any significant volumes to initially work with. So you have to find that right contract manufacturer that understands that, and they're willing and able to give you the time you need to get that product into what most people would call a VIP or an MVP, which in this case stands for a minimal viable product.
Right. So you've got your clearance, you've got your manufacturer picked out. So capital's the missing bridge at this point in time. And what does that story look like for you? Like, are you going to, is it private equity? Is it going to strategics? Is it, family office? I mean, what's your sort of game plan around getting the necessary funding to get it commercially ready and then launching?
Office and specific angel investment groups. You mentioned private equity and VC. As a general rule, we're not big enough for them yet.
Right.
If I would have those conversations, they would probably say, come back to me when you have a few $1 million in sales and, a very sharp hockey curve. So we're not ready for them yet. It never hurts to get on their radar, and keep them updated, maybe with a quarterly update. But at this point, I think we're looking at probably 3 different potential investors. Family offices certainly fall into this category, particularly if you can find ones that are interested in this particular space. Angel investment groups, I think, probably are a very good target for us, as well as, here being in Northeast Ohio, the state of Ohio is very supportive and has a number of entrepreneurial support groups that we work with. So I think ultimately it'll be some combination of one of those 3.
And then once you do get the money and you do get the product, what's the pathway to commercialism? Is it getting the early sites, the beta sites kind of proven out, and then are you going to go standalone, or are you going to go try and find a strategic, or are you just going to play your options?
Playing the options is a pretty good accurate description. Initially, we're in conversations with a couple of different, what I would call specialty distributor groups, where they have strong experience in launching a product. When you're launching a new product to the marketplace, that is very much a missionary sale, and it involves a lot of sweat equity to get over that hump and to get that flywheel moving before you start to see some really nice recurring revenue from it. So you want to find the right distributor that has expertise in the vascular access space and has that history of they know what it takes to launch a new technology. So we feel pretty confident that we have the right people to work with initially. And then depending on how well the market accepts our product and what the adoption rate is, that will ultimately decide what's the next step. I suspect it'll be adding additional specialty distributors throughout the U.S., but there are a lot of those decisions that remain to be determined.
Got it. I think you got one of those big distributors in Ohio somewhere too, right?
We
One of the really
absolutely
big
do.
ones. So that's great news. Have you thought about, like, the world's changing really fast? Have you used any type of AI or intelligence in your processes thus far with manufacturing, with developing? Have you, I know, is there anything that you've done with that technology?
It mentioned Valentium Medical for contractors. We have no doubt that they are world class, top quality. They are all over that. And so, we feel like are partnering with a right group that will really help us take those next steps. I do believe that AI is absolutely going to change the world as we know it. And as we grow, I could absolutely see us having the need to have a full-time person in charge of implementing AI into every aspect of our business, but we're not quite there yet. I need
No.
to address those mission critical items we've discussed before we'd be ready to take that next step.
No, I definitely see that for sure. It's just exciting when you see all these different things happening, whether it's designing something, building a workflow process. I'm sure the manufacturing they're using it every day just to sort of maintain that QC. So those are remarkable things. Well, any last, thoughts for you on the technology? I do have a finishing question for you, but I just wanted to make sure that, is there anything else you want to leave us with regards to Sonistic, next steps, and when do you think we'll hear from Sonistic again with a major milestone?
Address the capital issue, and that will open the doors to our next two mission critical items. So it's Sonistic, and that's spelled Sonostik. Anyone watching this, please feel free to visit our website and get us on your radar and keep us in mind.
Well, great. Well, Gary, as we close up, I have one final question for you. And I think it's always a fun question, especially with somebody as experienced as you are. Um, going through the trials and tribulations of a great career, what would Gary Wakeford today offer as advice to his 22 self?
Be two things. One is learn to trust your gut, and more importantly, learn to act on it. If something doesn't feel right to you, even if you can't articulate why, don't do it. And if something does just in your heart, all of your instincts are telling you this is the right thing to do, regardless of what other people might be telling you, listen to that inner voice and make the decision.
So follow your heart, not your brain.
It's true. When I look
That's
at my
great.
career, biggest mistakes I've made were when I allowed somebody to talk me into something that just didn't feel right. And the flip side of that coin was the best decisions I've made were when I listened to that inner voice, even though everyone was telling me I was wrong.
That's great. So you get anchored in your core belief, and don't let fear get in the way and all those other things trying to get in your ears. So it's a great way to end our podcast today. Gary, again, thank you so much. It's been such a wonderful time getting to meet you on our pre-calls and then today's call as well. I wish you and Sonistic the very, very best. Thank you. That's a wrap on Zero Friction, the show built around one simple idea: remove the barriers and the revenue will follow. If today's conversation was valuable, please subscribe and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. That's how we will grow this community. I'm Terry Kuchaluchis, Revenue Architect powered by AI. Come find me at my website, myrevrx.com, and let's talk about what friction is costing you and your organization. Until next time, keep removing the barriers and keep the revenue flowing.